Beautiful mountain peaks stretched overhead, stabbing into the sky with majestic dominance. There weren't any clouds overhead, so the brilliance of the blue was quite breathtaking. Luckily, there weren't any Tengu in sight. Nori walked behind Vihori and Luxi, and behind him were about 30 armed pirates. Apparently, before Nori and the others arrived, Vihori had gathered volunteers to embark on a rather dangerous mission. These were those brave souls. They had left the day before and sailed across the river to the far bank, and they started hiking along the mountain trails. For the first night, everyone, including Luxi, was silent. The gravity of the mission had weighed down on all of them, but also an uncomfortable sort of distance had been implanted between Vihori and Luxi. Neither of them said anything to one another, and because they were silent, the others were too. The mountain path they strode upon had been worn down and shown signs of constant and consistent use.
Excuse me, may I please ask a question?
Why, certainly, Mr. Nori, was it? I suppose it would be improper to continue calling you Onistan, wouldn't it?
So, what is the plan? Are we going to find one of their settlements and kill the Tengu that we find there?
That is a great question. We're pirates, not murderers. I mean, war is one thing, but are we in a war?
No, we are not in a war. Yet. But we can't afford to show weakness. Otherwise, we will be inviting future attacks. Mr. Nori, we are going to find a nesting area, kill a few adult Tengu, and then allow the others to get reinforcements. Meanwhile, we're going to gather all of the eggs and hold them hostage, temporarily.
You're not going to smash them, are you?
No, of course not. As my sister said, we are not murderers. We will use them as bait to lure out their better warriors, which is what we want.
I see. You plan to fight enough of their stronger warriors to discourage them from attacking Gahoda again. That's a smart plan, I suppose. But it could easily go wrong, resulting in a complete loss of forces.
That may have been the case before, but since we have you two fighting with us as well, then our chances of success go up considerably. May I ask you a question, Mr. Nori? What is Miss Flara like? I will admit, she caught me off guard with her proposal plan. Is she usually so...
reckless? Yeah, I think so. She wasn't originally assigned a Chutar when she first went to Jedi to study at the University of Magic. Laura had to get one, though, after her little experiment.
Oh, she is a mage then. How fascinating. And why was she required to get a Chutar after her experiment?
Bear in mind, I didn't experience this, but she apparently summoned a metal kami just to see if it would attract lightning. Well, it did, and exploded. She has the tendency to leap into danger to follow her passions, or to protect those she cares about.
She did what? Wow, that is really surprising, since she's been so quiet and shy around me. I'm impressed.
The thing about Miss Flara is that she has a great deal of social anxiety. She's very skittish around new people. Aside from her two best friends, Flara would prefer isolation. However, when something sparks her interest, she's willing to go the distance.
Can you give me an example?
She found an old map in a puzzle box, so we went on an adventure to find a long-lost ruin of a university research facility. It was inside a Tsuchigumo-infested forest, and yet she braved the forest to find the long-lost lore inside.
Miss Flara sounds like an intellectual. That's quite relieving.
Oh? How so?
Assuming that he hasn't changed in the last few years, my brother has always been one to favor good conversation and intellectual stimulation. Let's just say that a lot of the young pirate women around when we were growing up wanted less discussion and more...
Yes, well, as I said, I'm pleased I might be able to have some great conversation with her. I was a little concerned that we wouldn't have anything in common. And what about you, Mr. Nori? How is it that you came to serve with the Chutar? Coming across an Imperial princess is quite a rare treat indeed, but I had never heard of an Onistan Chutar. Were there any others?
I was the first, and only, Onistan to enter into the Order. As for how I joined, well, it wasn't by choice.
Yeah, you mentioned that you were conscripted. Is that normal practice for the Chutar?
It depends. For the most part, people can request that their children be evaluated for the life of a Chutar, if that child shows great aptitude and whether or not there's interest. On the very rare occasion when a child does something extraordinary, they're evaluated and then conscripted if they have potential.
And you did something extraordinary?
Yeah, I fought a cave bear as a child.
A cave bear? Why in the hell would you do that? Was it a sort of test of strength?
No, nothing like that. My friends and I were playing in one of the fields surrounding Onista, near one of the farms where food is grown. Well, there was a little girl who was nearby, and she was picking wildflowers. She must have been about 4 or so at the time. Well, a juvenile cave bear ran into the clearing from some of the rocky areas near the field. It was in a mad craze, and it ran straight for the little girl.
You threw yourself against a cave bear to protect a little girl?
Yeah. I was one of the biggest and strongest of my friends at the time, so I was the one who distracted the bear, while my best friend at the time grabbed the little girl and ran her to safety. Our third friend sprinted to where the adults were, calling for help. Even as I punched at the beast, I knew I was probably going to die. I just kept on enduring so that my friends and the girl could get to safety.
A sudden smile spread across both Vihori's and Luxie's faces, as well as several of the surrounding random pirates behind him.
The whole reason we were out there in the first place was that a Chutar representative was in Onista taking a tour of the outlying farms. I guess he saw what I did, how long I was able to defend against the bear. After that, the Chutar conscripted me right then and there, even as I was being mended up by our doctors. My parents tried to fight it, but it was an imperial decree from a representative of the imperial throne. I couldn't resist, and so I left Onista several days later.
I'm really sorry that you were forced into this life. I can't imagine having to leave your home like that.
You were very brave for willing to sacrifice your life for that young child. Based on what I've heard of you from Miss Flara's story, as well as what Luxie added in, you're still very brave. We're almost where the nests are. Let's maintain silence until the start of the fighting. Remember, everyone watch out for one another. Strike fiercely, and only kill the adults. Leave any eggs alone.
The pirates behind Nori all declared their understanding through brief whispered yeses. The path they strode upon wound around a small natural pool of water, around several more tall cliffs, and around the edge of a cliff that overlooked the valley below. Vihori kept low to the ground, and he watched the sky with dreaded alertness. Nori matched his form, and he took steady breaths to calm his ecstatic nerves. The path came to a steep incline of piled rocks, and Vihori slowly and quietly crawled up the pile. His movements were calculated and slow, as to not dislodge any of the rocks for the people behind him. When Nori crawled upon them, he felt how easy it would be to move too hard or too fast, and send clumps of rocks clattering downward. With great effort, he managed to get to the top, just like Luxie and Vihori. There was another sort of natural pathway that wound between more cliffs, but eventually, Nori and the others came to a great flat rocky clearing where wooden houses were built. The houses were built in a large ring, with houses standing beside the rock walls. Another collection of houses formed an inner ring, and in the center of the inner ring was a wooden carving of some kind of giant Tengu figure. Perhaps it was some kind of totem, or guardian statue for worship? Nori had never seen such a thing before. Vihori waved for his people to get closer to him.
Go in, fight hard, and cause as much ruckus as you can. If any of the Tengu try and leave, then let them. We want them to get to their leaders. Is everyone ready? Okay, on 3.
Vihori raised one finger, then a second, and then a third. He drew his sword, stepped out into the area, and then yelled as loud as he could. He stormed one of the closest Tengu, who was caught completely by surprise. Nori moved in another direction, and he heard the creature's death cry. His heart lurched inside him, and yet he understood the intent of Vihori's plan. Nori swiftly approached a smaller adult Tengu, and he roared himself. He raised his Tetsubo high, but rather than hit the creature with it, he struck one of the wooden houses. The spot where he struck crumbled with ease. The Tengu screeched, and then it tried to fly away. A Tengu armed with a spear advanced on him, and its jagged point rushed towards Nori's face. Nori stepped back, parried the bird's weapon, and eventually smashed it when he could. Once more, rather than crush the life from the Tengu, Nori purposely missed, but swung with so much force the Tengu was keenly aware of how powerful Nori was. While the other Gahodans allegedly killed the foes they fought, Nori went around creating holes in homes, smashing weapons, and yelling as intimidatingly as he could. More often than not, it was enough to cause the Tengu to fly away. Nori stepped inside one of the houses, and he came face to face with a pair of Tengu standing in front of a large nest. Inside the nest were 3 larger eggs, sitting right beside one another. Tears welled in the Tengu's eyes, and they both held their wings out open to bar his access. Elsewhere, the sounds of dying Tengu filled the air. Nori moved over to one of the walls, and he smashed a hole in it. To his delight, the hole led to a spot with a cliff that overlooked the valley below. He struck it many times, creating a large hole that even he could escape through. Nori stepped closer to the Tengu, his Tetsubo held to his side.
Do you have a means of carrying your eggs?
For the moment, the Tengu glanced at one another and then back to Nori.
Do you?
One of the Tengus nodded slightly.
Then take your eggs and go. Your people attacked the Gahodans, and so this is the retribution that came from it. I've not slain any of your kind, and I would like to avoid doing so. Go to your chief and tell him to come here to us. Our leader demands an audience.
For a long moment, the Tengu just gazed at Nori, not moving or really reacting.
Go!
The Tengu flapped up into the air, and they grabbed their eggs in their talon claws. One carried 2, while the other carried the 3rd. The Tengu with the 2 eggs flew out through the hole, but the one carrying 1 stopped when they got to the opening.
Thank you.
The Tengu disappeared from view moments later. Nori remained in the hut, and he listened to the sounds of death and combat all around him. He winced, and he only came out when he heard Vihori calling out. Soon, they would no doubt collect the remaining eggs all together and prepare for a defensive battle. Nightfall was almost upon them, and so too would be the fury of a Tengu reprisal. Apisa, Rayko, and Flara sat at the table on a balcony overlooking the city of Gahoda. The sun had set several hours ago, and the brilliant white moon was high in the sky. Apisa loved nights like these, although her spirit still wrestled a little. Somewhere else, their new friend Nori was doing battle, or causing trouble. Apisa wasn't quite sure. The fact of the matter was that he was in danger, and she wasn't there to stand beside him. Her stomach flip-flopped over and over, and she let out another heavy sigh.
He's going to be fine, darling. Nori is one of the toughest people we know.
What? What are you talking about? I wasn't even thinking about him.
Oh, yes, you were. It's totally obvious, and it's sorta adorable.
Okay, maybe I was thinking about him a little. I mean, he's off doing dangerous stuff, and we're not there to support him. I'm just a little worried, you know? We don't even know those Gahodans. So how can we be sure they're going to protect our friend?
Yes, I suppose Nori really has become our friend. Things have changed considerably since we first laid eyes on him, yes?
Yes, it certainly has. At the beginning, I just thought of him as a Chutar, a reminder of my heritage and my prison. Now, I see the Oni stand before I see the role, although I can't quite unsee the Chutar.
I'm sure we've not made his life any easier. We put him in a ton of danger, and yet he never stopped us from doing stuff. He just fought alongside us. When he gets back, we really should remind him how special he is to us.
Yes, well, more special to some of us, yes? Admit it, you do like him, don't you? More so than the common acquaintance, a friend.
You can be honest with us. We are your best friends, after all.
Okay, I may have a tiny little crush on him.
What? No, really? I would have never guessed.
As I said, it is adorable.
You know what? Let's change the subject, shall we? What should we talk about? How about the fact that you are going to get married to a guy you don't even know?
The smile fell from Flara's face, and she stared wide-eyed at the both of them.
I guess that was a little bold and unexpected of me, huh?
Bold and unexpected are understatements, darling. How are you feeling? I mean, really?
Yeah, joking aside, are you doing okay?
Honestly, no. I can't believe I actually proposed a political marriage. I had to do something, though. I'm afraid of what will happen if the Empire isn't unified. Some of the writings from the scroll indicate...
Yeah, danger and devastation, blah blah blah. How are you doing emotionally?
I'm scared. I honestly never gave thought to my marriage, or if I'd even have one. What if he doesn't like me? Or if I come to find out he's a terrible person? I can tell you all manner of things related to commies, ancient lore, and the histories of the Empire. But I am totally clueless about men, relationships, or anything like that. What if I mess up and make a mistake?
Oh, you will, in fact, make a lot of mistakes. That's all part of the grand adventure. That's called marriage.
Amori walked out onto the balcony, and she held a bottle of something in her hands. A wide smile smeared across her face when she sat down at the table at the unoccupied space.
Even when you're able to marry for love, marriage can be a crazy cyclone of challenges, joys, and sorrows. I've been married twice, so I am quite the expert in knowing how to mess up.
You were married twice?
Yes, I was. I outlived both husbands. One out of spite and one out of regret.
What do you mean, out of spite and out of regret? What were your husbands like?
Amori grinned widely, took a swig from the bottle, and then winced with intensity. When she offered the bottle to Flara and Rayko, they both politely shook their heads. Apisa, on the other hand, was more than a bit curious. She carefully took the bottle, brought it to her lips, and then dipped it back ever so slightly. A pungent taste assaulted her tongue and the back of her throat, and she closed her eyes tightly in protest.
Oh, Saito. That's so strong.
Yes, it is. Try choking on it for a few years. That's when it really starts to taste good. Now, as far as your questions, both of my husbands were completely different, like spring and autumn. I married my first husband when I was no older than you girls. It was a political marriage of sorts, one that bound my mother's pirate clan to another lord's. You see, before I took over, Gahoda was a massive city, filled with a dozen competing lords and ladies, all trying to be top pirate.
So, you know about political marriages then?
I know that if they're chosen well, then yes, they work very well. Mine did not. It started out wonderful because my husband was young, sexy as hell, and passionate about life. It was fun for about 2 years or so. But then he decided that he wanted more out of his life.
He wanted more.
Her husband cheated on her.
Amori pointed at Rayko and nodded.
I came home from a mini-campaign of pillaging and combat between our combined faction and another pirate lord. When I got into our home, he was rolling around with a pair of younger, perkier ladies. Ladies who were enamored with his exploits. Well, I couldn't let that slide, so I had to cut our marriage short.
You divorced him?
No, dear. I literally cut our marriage short by cutting off his head.
Wow. What did you do to the girls?
That is your first question?
Yes, it is.
I didn't kill them, but I banished them from Gahoda, as it were. I told them if I ever saw them in the city or in life again, I would kill them and their entire families. They believed me, and so they left. After that, I took the head of my recently late husband to his father, the Pirate Lord.
You did? Was he terribly upset?
Oh, he was terribly upset. Indeed. So I killed him in one-on-one combat. Took over his clan, gave them all to my mother. All this happened before she woke up that morning, too. That whole ordeal affected my view on love for the next few years. I met my husband when I was 25, and we married several years later.
So wait. Was this husband Vihori's father?
Yes, he was an amazing man, and I miss him every day. My second husband wasn't a Gahodan, but somewhere far to the northeast. He'd stopped into Gahoda, not realizing it was a pirate city, but instead he just assumed it was a normal port town. I was the one who stormed up to his little boat, demanding who he was. Back then, there weren't any Oni stands in Gahoda, so he stood out like the oddity that he was.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying that your second husband was an Oni-stan?
Got a problem with Oni stands, do you? I find that quite strange, since one of your companions is one.
I have had bad previous experiences with outcasted Oni-stans. Nori is quite different, though.
That's too bad. I've heard about the rowdy nature of other outcasted Oni stands as well, which is why I stormed up to Sojinro like I did. I remember, even though I was yelling at him, he still greeted me with a broad smile. To make a long story short, Sojinro was a smuggler who sailed up and down the river, taking black market goods from one place to another. For the record, Sojinro was not like other outcasted Oni stands you hear about. He left his home because he took the fall for a loved one. Sojinro was the best sort of guy.
So when did you know that you, really liked him?
Flara let out a snort of laughter, but she hid her smile behind her hand. Rayko simply grinned.
I didn't know for a long time. In fact, it was sort of funny now that I look back at it, but I actually took Sojinro captive. And I told him he couldn't leave the port of Gahoda until I said so. He understood. And then he never left. He started out as an indentured servant and became my closest friend and ally. Sojinro had been taught to fight as a child, and he used that skill to defend our stronghold whenever we got attacked. Those actions ended his indentured servitude, and then he began fighting with me. Over the years, we both solidified much of my mother's power. We eventually fell in love, and then married.
That sounds lovely.
It was. About 5 years ago, my husband and my son went on this journey into the Tengu Mountains. And they returned with that little trinket that was stolen. It was so special to me because they'd finally found it together. 2 years later, there was an assassination attempt on my life. Sojinro stopped the attacker and was killed in the process.
I am so sorry to hear that. Is that what caused Luxie to leave?
Yeah. she blame me for not squashing the rising tension when I first heard about it a year prior? I was bored without any real challenges because I gained total control of the city 12 years prior. I wanted another fight. If for nothing else, for old time's sake. And in my hubris, I assumed I could handle anything life threw at me. Well, I was proven wrong. Luxie and her closest friends stole my flagship, the Grinning Panda, and left Gahoda. The Grinning Panda was the ship Sojinro and I sailed together. For a long time, you see. It was, and still is, quite special to me.
For a long moment, no one said anything. Amori took another swig of the liquor, and when she offered it to Apisa, she shook her head this time.
What kind of man is Vihori? I'm really nervous about the man I'm now connected to. If I am being completely honest.
It's totally understandable. I might be biased, but Vihori is one of the best men I've ever met. He's so much like his father. It's aching sometimes. Sojinro made sure to instill a gentleman's nature into our son by teaching him the decorum of the nobility, philosophy, and ethics, and all that is soft and fluffy. I remember saying he was trying to make our children soft, so I was intent on teaching them the family method of swordsmanship and pirate fighting. You don't have to be worried about Vihori.
Really?
Yes. Even though he's a pirate prince, he sees himself as a knight and a servant of the people. He works so damned hard on protecting the rights and the livelihoods of the Gahodans that I'd be confident about leaving the city to him when I die. That's why I was so adamant about not letting some unknown noble's kid take the city from us. Vihori loves good conversation, art, music, and he also writes poetry himself.
He does?
Yeah, but he gets easily embarrassed about it. He's a really good man, and I promise you, Flara, he's going to be a great husband to you.
That's good to know.
Amori got up from the table and moved to stand in the doorway, leading inside.
I'll be honest with you, Flara. You may have saved both Gahoda and your empire. I was going to keep my city isolated had you not made your proposal. Not to be cruel to your people, but to protect my people in the best way I know how. I honor your sacrifice, and I admire your strength very much. And, from what I could tell, you're an amazing young woman. With courage, intelligence, and just the sort of vibrant spirit that will inspire my son. I'm very happy with you.
Thank you, future mother-in-law.
Amori turned back around and gazed confused at Flara for only a moment. She crossed the breadth of space between them and bent down to where Flara sat. In an instant, Amori, the pirate queen, wrapped Flara in a big hug.
You're most welcome, future daughter-in-law.
As soon as Amori left them, Apisa turned a wicked grin on Rayko.
Now we just have to find you someone, and then we can plan on all having kids at the same time.
Kids?
Rayko and Apisa just laughed, and soon so did Flara.
Form up! They're finally here!
Nori licked his lips as he swung his Tetsubo in front of him in wide arcs. After they had cleared out the adult Tengu earlier, Vihori had Nori smash most of the houses with his war club. The other sailors had collected all of the eggs, and they also dragged several of the larger nests so they were at the base of the totem statue. The eggs had been placed in the nests together, carefully. Other sailors took the debris, and Vihori and Luxie made 4 enormous wood piles that would eventually become massive and brilliant bonfires. The Gahodans stood in a large circle around the nests, with Nori, Luxie, and Vihori standing toward the front. The night was dark, and it concealed the Tengu, but their rage-filled screeches and the sounds of their many wings fell around them like dissonant musical notes. Nori kept shifting his gaze all around, and yet the edge of the fire only extended so far. His blood ran cold inside his veins, and he clenched his jaw in anticipation. All at once, dozens of Tengu soared toward him. Their faces were locked in anger, and they held their spears in their grips. Nori swatted the spear tips away at the last moment, and then twisted his Tetsubo around in time to slap a couple of the Tengu from the sky. This was not like the raid. These Tengus were warriors, and anything less than his best could mean the downfall of his current and temporary allies. He stepped in and crushed the skull of one of the Tengus as it was rising up. He had to hop back to avoid another Tengu from skewering him. From the corner of his eye, he saw 2 Tengu for every Gahodan, and the sound of flapping wings from somewhere in the darkness still continued. Nori's arms pumped wildly as he deflected, counterattacked, and dipped past wild Tengu attacks. The others had given Nori plenty of space, so he swung his Tetsubo full force without fearing hitting any of the Gahodans. Tengu bodies laid on the ground around him, although the ones at his feet were intact. Tengu chunks and body clumps were around Vihori and Luxie. They moved around with amazing footwork and let their blades slash spear and Tengu limbs alike. Many of the other Gahodans stood huddled together, relying on one another to keep themselves alive. Nori stayed where he was, and he killed and clobbered Tengu who fought with the random Gahodans beside him. Whenever he saved one of their lives, they beamed gleeful smiles, right before getting back into the fierce dance of the spear and sword. Several Tengu had flown over where the nest was.
Oni-stan, guard the nest!
Nori leapt toward the flying Tengu, and he crushed their wings with swift upward and downward strikes. Their bones snapped under Nori's might, and he crushed their heads moments later. From this vantage point, Nori beheld the battlefield. 2 of the Gahodans lay dead among the Tengus, while more than a half-dozen were seriously injured. They still struck out with determination, though, as worthy as any Onistan. Luxie and Vihori stood 20 feet apart, and they were focused on their own individual surroundings. Just watching the 2, Vihori was the more skilled fighter. His movements were crisper, and each attack always flowed into another. Vihori's expression was a mask of grim solitude. He remained in one spot and only altered his stance within a few steps. Each block and parry led to a killing blow, which led to another parry or block. Luxie, on the other hand, was a little more mobile and dexterous. She moved in wide circles and slipped under the attacks of the Tengu, only to wind up behind them. Her attacks always seemed to find her opponent's most vulnerable spots, and she exploited it greedily. She rolled under spear thrusts, sidestepped, and then hopped around her foes. A wide smile creased her face as she slew each enemy. A menacing-looking Tengu armed with an ornate spear appeared on the edge of the firelight, and its eyes were on Vihori. Nori's gut clenched inside him as he moved as fast as he could. The Tengu with the special spear dove for the pirate prince, coming at him from above at an angle. Its weapon was poised. Nori collided with Vihori and shoved him away at the last moment. His eyes met with the Tengu's, and the spear plunged into Nori's lower right stomach. A sharp pain exploded on his senses. He screamed out in pain. At the same time, he grabbed the spear shaft with one hand. Nori corded his muscles tight, and then he raised his Tetsubo one-handed. The Tengu tried to pull its spear free, and it nearly did so, but Nori's strength was greater indeed. The Tetsubo went down, and Nori struck the Tengu on its shoulder. It was a hard smack, but it wasn't his full might. Nevertheless, the Tengu's shoulder crumpled out of form. A moment later, Vihori's sword removed the Tengu's head. A savage screech echoed out, and suddenly all of the other Tengu yelled out in unison. They flapped into the air, but then it appeared that only retreated back into the darkness. Nori fell to a knee and he gazed down at the spear that still stuck in his stomach. Thanks to his Chutar armor, it was only piercing him at its very tip. But still, his flesh had been penetrated, and blood poured from the wound. Luxie ran up to him and knelt down beside him.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I think so. It's not too bad. Can you please pull it out?
You stupid bastard! It's not that bad! You've been stabbed by a spear in your stomach. That's a fatal wound.
Vihori bent down and then looked at the wound.
Actually, I think he's right. He's still injured, but we can probably just dress it for now. The armor is ruined, though.
Yeah, I can always get more in Sinba. Pull it out before the next attack, okay?
The Gahodans all gathered around the nest while Luxie pulled the spear out. Another one of the Gahodans helped Nori out of his broken armor and then placed some cloth on his shallow wound. Vihori stepped out in front of the Gahodans a couple of steps.
Listen to me, Tengu. We know you're still out there. We only attacked you because you attacked us. You were drawn here so that we could deliver you a message. That message is this. If you ever attack Gahoda again, we will hunt down each and every one of your kind. Upon Saito, I swear this. Likewise, if me and my fellow Gahodans do not return, then Gahoda will initiate a war of genocide against you. We have not harmed your eggs, and we're willing to stop all of this now and go back to Gahoda, if you are willing to cease fire against us. What say you?
A heavy silence lingered in the wake of Vihori's voice.
What say you?
An elder Tengu, wearing a sort of dark purple shoulder garment, stepped out into the edge of the light from the shadows. It held a staff with a gnarled headpiece.
If we agree to this, you will leave us in peace? You will allow us to collect our eggs?
Allow us to collect our dead, and we shall leave you in peace.
The older Tengu shifted its gaze over the many dead brethren who littered the cleared ground. When it locked its gazes with Vihori again, it thumped the end of its staff against the rocky ground.
Until a new chieftain is chosen, I speak for the clan. We will agree to this. We want no more war with you. But we also don't want any more of your people stealing our eggs for food.
Such a thing is not sanctioned by Gahoda, and those who do it are doing so under their own peril. Do with them as you please.
Very well. Heed my words, human. We will still not join you in what is to come. Those who serve the magic eagles, the ones known as the Vren, came to us to entice us to join them. A great war is coming to this land and your people. Many will die. If you lose the war, all of you will die. The Tengu will survive. Until a new chieftain is chosen, I speak for the clan, and I say we will leave your lands untouched. Death comes on swift wings. Collect your dead and be gone from our lands.
Nori gave Luxie one last look before he moved over to where one of the dead Gahodans lay. He picked up the poor fellow and then followed Vihori, Luxie, and the others out of the nesting area. Just as it had been the night before, the splendid moon glimmered brilliantly in the night's sky. Flara sat alone at the table on the balcony, and she stared upward, silent as the night itself. Earlier that day, Nori, Luxie, and her soon-to-be husband, Vihori, returned from their revenge campaign. While she had not agreed with the premise, she also understood that it was one method of securing peace of mind for the people of Gahoda. As soon as he was back, Vihori had to provide reports to his mother, and Luxie helped Nori to the Gahodan doctor. Poor Nori. He had suffered a slight injury, but at least he was alive. Flara sighed as she peered deep into the center of the moon. A couple of months ago, she had been a totally different person. and the distance between that version of herself and her current state, well, it was quite unique indeed. Each of the obstacles that she and her friends overcame had whittled something off of her. What remained was a much stronger and bolder person. And yet, it felt so strange, and more than a bit frightening. Her thoughts kept returning to the pirate prince. Flara winced. He was absolutely gorgeous. And from what Amori had said about him, he was a great guy. But how was she to know for sure? How could she truly know that she didn't make the gravest of mistakes? How could...
There you are. I was looking for you.
Flara shifted around and noticed the pirate prince standing in the doorway. A small smile was on his face. Flara started to stand.
Vihori?
Vihori held up his hand, which stopped Flara from rising. He walked over to the table and sat on the other side of it, across from her.
I was hoping that we could actually have a conversation. Things have been so fast-paced since you arrived, and we really have not had any chance to really, get to know one another.
Okay. What would you want to talk about?
The moonlight covered Vihori's body like a lace, and his eyes seemed to sparkle in the daylight. He sat there so comfortably. And Flara? Well, she felt her body sweat, and she had to fight down the urge to squirm under his mesmerizing gaze.
Nori told me that you're a mage at the university. That's really fascinating. What do you study exactly?
Oh, well, I study kami summoning. I was really fascinated with the study of calling forth an elemental kami spirit and receiving aid from them. Depending on what you have to offer them, and also how you treat them, the kami spirits might help you.
That's really interesting. So do you specialize in one specific element?
No. That is a different magical discipline called kami embodiment. That's when a mage can channel and utilize one specific element by binding an elemental kami spirit to their soul. What I do is kami summoning, which gives me the opportunity to provide offerings to request the service of any of the kami spirits. There are 5 natural elements, as well as wind.
Wait, so wind isn't an element?
It depends on which scholars you ask. Some of the more modern theorists say that it is an element since it has a population of kami spirits connected to it. However, some of the older scholars of thought believe that while there are wind kami spirits, that wind is actually the breath of the universe, similar to how we inhale and exhale. Sorry, I was rambling.
Don't be sorry. I love good conversation. I had no idea that there were conflicting philosophies related to wind.
Your mother mentioned that you liked good conversation. She also mentioned that you like poetry.
You had a conversation about me with my mother? I'm a little embarrassed. Yes, I rather like poetry.
Do you ever write your own?
Yes, I have written some of my own.
Can I please hear something?
Vihori paused for a moment and then looked up to the moon. A mysterious aura emitted from him, and Flara couldn't help but stare. Under normal circumstances, she hated being talked to, or even having someone other than her best friends violate her rather large personal bubble. But Vihori was a little different.
How about something brand new and original?
Oh, okay.
Like a distant jewel untouched by human hand, the splendor of the moon gazes down upon this sleeping land. She travels alone across a star-filled sky, and throughout her journey she can't help but wonder why. Why is she doomed to a lonely fate, with only empty landscapes to compensate? What splendors exist during the reign of the sun? The moon sees hints of beauty when her nightly trek is done. Like a distant jewel untouched by human hand, the splendor of the moon bids farewell to an awakening land.
Wow. That was a pretty poem. if not a little sad.
Yeah, I was trying to come up with something on the spot. Thank you. There's something I would like to say, but I certainly hope it won't come out wrong.
Okay. What is it?
I'm willing to wait as long as it takes for you to become comfortable with me. I don't want you to feel any pressure to say or do anything that you're not ready for. I would love to get to know you, and I certainly hope that we have the opportunity to have great conversations. But we don't have to have them if you're not feeling ready or able to at the time. I'm aware that you're pretty shy.
I am incredibly shy.
As I mentioned, no pressure. And as for anything beyond that, I want you to know that I'm not going to pressure you with anything like that either. I want to get to know you, and I'm willing to take as much time as you want, okay?
Thank you. That sounds really nice.
Can you please tell me more about commies? I'd love to hear more about them.
Sure.
Luxie smiled to herself as she peered over the edge of the upper floor balcony to the pair of individuals talking below her. Vihori and Flara were so absorbed in their talk that they didn't notice that she was above them. She sighed as she turned her attention away from them and back to the city that stretched out before her. By this time of night, many of the lights in the buildings had been blown out, and the citizens were no doubt settling in for bed.
She certainly is a beautiful city, isn't she?
Luxie had been leaning on the stone railing of the balcony, and her mother Amori stepped out and leaned against the side railing of the balcony closest to the door. For the moment, Luxie glanced down to the ground far below her. From where Amori leaned on the railing, escape was impossible. Amori wasn't smiling, and she had her arms crossed over her chest.
Yeah, it really is. I wanted to come back so many times before.
Why didn't you?
Because I stole your ship. The one thing that you and Father sailed on. I was so stupid, and I was hurting so much. It was the last thing I had left of him, but it was the only thing you and Vihori had of Father too. I was afraid if I came back, I'd get the ship taken from me, and then I'd lose you and Vihori anyway. I was scared. I'm sorry, Mother.
Her mother wrapped Luxie in a hug and clutched her close. Luxie was taller than Amori was, if only by a few inches. Amori's cheek was against Luxie's.
You stupid fool. You should have come home years ago. You get your ego and hot-headedness from me, damn kid.
Luxie hugged her mother back, and she let her long suppressed tears flow down her cheeks. They stayed like that for a long time, but Luxie didn't care. For the first time in a long time, her heart hummed with a sense of peace. She was finally home, at last.